I thank Dr. Giroir and Ms. Liscam, our witnesses, for being here today. During the rise of the opioid crisis, amidst the many lives lost in its wake, law enforcement found that the challenge to cracking down on the supply of synthetic opioids like fentanyl analogues was that drug traffickers could sell a slightly changed substance that did not fall under the existing schedule of the Controlled Substances Act. In February of 2018, the Drug Enforcement Administration, under President Trump's watch, used its authority to ban all fentanyl substances by placing them into Schedule I of the Controlled Substances Act. By that decision, criminals would now face the consequences of the destruction they have left throughout our country. However, under existing law, the Drug Enforcement Administration is only allowed to use its emergency regulatory powers to ban all fentanyl substances for 2 years. After that, it could be extended for at most 1 year after consultation with the Department of Health and Human Services. You would think that the least this Congress could do is to extend the scheduling of fentanyl under the Controlled Substances Act indefinitely. A proposed bill, the Stopping Overdoses of Fentanyl Analogues Act, is supported by attorneys general in all 50 states. This isn't a conservative issue, it's not a liberal issue, it's not a rural issue or an urban issue. If the Attorney General of Texas and the Attorney General of California can find common ground on this issue, the very least we could do is act on this issue. But instead, we are racing toward an expiration of the ban on fentanyl analogues simply because Congress is unwilling to act. This is entirely preventable. Congress had a chance during the last year's appropriations debate to include a measure empowering the DEA to keep the ban on fentanyl and fentanyl-related substances indefinitely. It failed. According to a Washington Post editorial, it appears that the reluctance with giving the DEA this essential authority may be due to the concerns of some in Congress about sentencing guidelines. I think the reason we haven't heard any public opposition from members about this is that, quite frankly, it's hard to publicly stand up and oppose extending the scheduling of fentanyl analogues. It's crazy to think that the reason we're in this position is that some in Congress are concerned that convicted drug traffickers would spend a little extra time in jail. A concern about the amount of time drug traffickers spend behind bars is a difficult explanation to give to the families of people who have died from drug overdoses. But yet here we are. Next week, the scheduling of fentanyl analogues expires. I urge my colleagues to put partisan politics aside and put the needs of our constituents and the American people first. Some may think that a public health approach is the best way to solve the opioid crisis. Some think that providing law enforcement with the tools to hold suppliers and traffickers accountable is the best way to solve this issue. But doing nothing, waiting until 1 week before the deadline to do something, is not the answer. The failure to act is a disservice to our communities. It's a disservice to our constituents. It's a disservice to the families of the victims who have lost their lives. I yield back.